Hi everyone, and welcome to the weekly governance update here on VLGA Connect. Each week at this time, we talk about the news of the week with a governance lens with Stephen Cooper from Civic Mind. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Chris. How you going?
Going well, thanks. What about you?
Yeah, had a good week. Lots going on.
Indeed, and there's a bit to talk about. Some of the things we're waiting to see in relation to the forthcoming elections have become more evident to us this week. But firstly, I just want to get your take on some repeated calls this week as we go into heavier lockdowns due to coronavirus for the October elections to be deferred. I know we touched on this last week. I think it bears repeating. The likelihood of them being deferred, pretty slim, wouldn't you think?
Well, I mean, the talk, Chris, has been the Minister has power, and certainly under the Act, the Minister has a power to defer the elections. I tend to think that that's something for floods and fires and deferral for a week or two in an isolated area. I would still hold the view that if the Minister were to defer for a longer period of time, there's implications that would need to be addressed in Parliament. Not for us to preempt what a Minister wants to do, but so far the Minister's direction seems pretty clear. Chris, I think the other thing is, if you were looking at what would be the triggers for an election, and certainly the opportunity for people to put their candidacy forward is a live issue. The other really big one is, can the VEC safely conduct an election? And that would be a really main topic.
So two things on that. We are going to have a VLGA Connect interview with the Deputy Electoral Commissioner, Liz Williams, in the next week or so to talk about the process and the preparations. But we are also going to be speaking with the new Minister for Local Government. So if there's no announcement or decision before that time, we can certainly get some insight into his thinking around the issue in another week or so.
Yeah, and that'd be really interesting, Chris. I look forward to that because, look, the reality is either way, because of COVID-19, it's not ideal. There's nothing that's perfect in this situation. It's really about how the sector and the Minister can make the best of a bad lot.
All right, Steve. So on the elections, we've been waiting to see the regulations, particularly to see how the mandatory training is going to be delivered. And we've had some light shed on that issue this week as the regulations are finally with us.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a bad play on words, Chris, but imminent has become eminent. Because, yes, we've got the election regulations, but for a couple of areas of doubt that we can talk about, I think they are eminently unremarkable. There's no great surprises. They are written in a way that you would expect regulations for postal voting to come out. So there's a lot of clarity there, which is good.
And there's provision in there for the mandatory training to be provided in a virtual sense. That's obviously needed if the COVID-19 situation continues. You've got some insight, though, from LGV on how they think that will be delivered that you could share with us?
Yeah, I think a more formal announcement on that will be imminent as well, Chris, on that recurring theme. What we're hearing is that the department's looking at development of an online model of mandatory candidate training, which will actually offer candidates the flexibility of being able to log in at any particular time. For those who are who have less access to internet technology, there is a requirement under the Act, and the exact words elude me, but for the CEO to support candidates in achieving that training, and that may well be, the provision of computer equipment or the availability of computer equipment so that people can log in if they're otherwise unable to. And what we're also hearing is that may well avoid the need for councils to conduct their own mandatory training.
Which would provide some uniformity in the way that it's delivered, obviously. And it makes sense to me that if it's a training module like other forms of training you do, that there needs to be some sort of system of applying and being accepted with identification confirmed, etc. There's obviously a bit of work that needs to go into this, and then some sort of certificate of completion at the end, which you could use as evidence for your nomination purposes when you go to file to be a candidate.
Exactly, because as you touched on, Chris, any candidate is going to need to provide that evidence to the electoral manager when they lodge their candidacy. So really important that those issues, as well as the related privacy issues, are sorted before the release of that product.
couple of other things I want to touch on with you this week, Steve. Deliberative engagement. It's been one of our most watched live panel sessions. It's an oxymoron, I guess, because it was live at the time, but it's recorded now and you can watch it any time. But it just supports the view that councils really need to grasp what is deliberative engagement, what does it entail? And the question I've had all along is, how would councils know whether they're complying with the intent of the Act? What are the measures going to be on deliberative engagement? So there's a co-design process happening, as I understand it.
That's correct, Chris. Yeah, so there is a co-design going on, and what are the triggers for a particular type of engagement? You know, what's the sort of engagement that warrants nothing more than, you know, a notice on the council newsletter, or sorry, the council website, and feedback, compared with something that might equate a Section 223 type of engagement, or going further, a citizen jury type engagement. So what are the steps that each individual council can manage, because it will be different from council to council?
So Steve, what's the LGV approach to the co-design of these materials?
I think one thing, Chris, that the sector is now getting used to is a consistency of approach from local government Victoria. So there will be a co-design event on the 16th of July. People can log into that as an online consultation. That material will be sifted, and using a group of technical experts, material will be posted for use and development by the sector. And again, those questions that we talked about are going to be important, Chris, including the one that I'm surprised you didn't mention, being sortition.
Oh, forgive me. I usually don't miss an opportunity to bring sortition because, you know, it's been a new word for us all, and we like to show it off. But thank you for picking me up on that.
Look, and I know we make a bit of a joke of it, Chris, but it's a really important topic, because one of the opportunities in community engagement is to make sure that we're consulting with the same old group that we always consult with. So there's a real opportunity for the sector here.
We talked about the mandatory candidate training, the compulsory training for councillors post the election. I think LGV is looking for people with experience in this space to be contributing to the development of that work now.
We touched on this last week, Chris, and LGV are still looking for either councillors who have been involved in that induction process following the election, senior executives who've been involved in delivery, or governance type people who've been involved in the development of those kind of programs. Or they might be from an area of the organisation outside of governance, maybe the planning area, but to be involved in developing the mandatory induction model. So this is an opportunity for hardheads. The department is definitely looking for volunteers. It's not as we said last week, it's not a development opportunity, but there is a lot of experience out there. So good opportunity to contribute to an important process.
All right, so spread the word and be involved if you think you fit the bill. One last thing, Steve. Recently on VLGA Connect, we spoke with the Auditor General, Andrew Greaves, about the very wide-ranging sexual harassment survey that's happening in local government. It's a replication of the one that's been done more broadly in the public sector. You've been monitoring how that's going, and sounds like the opportunities to participate will disappear soon. So get in quickly might be the message.
I think there's a few things on this, Chris. So yes, and it's all on the VAGO website, the fact that there is a review of sexual harassment in local government going on. A really good start for anyone involved in the review that VAGO did in relation to state government, which was released in November last year, so November 2019. I'll come back to that in a minute. A survey instrument has been sent to every council for current council personnel, including councillors, to comment on issues associated with sexual harassment. There is also an opportunity for past and present council personnel to make direct submissions to VAGO. And you'll notice on the website there's VAGO has committed to anonymity if people so desire. So there's no intention, and in fact it would be counterproductive to name the people making submissions. It's the issues that are more important.
Steve, these cultural issues have been in the spotlight recently. I'm not going to name any specific examples, but would you agree this is a real opportunity for the leadership in local government? I'm talking not just the elected leadership, but also senior managers, to be promoting this opportunity to expose the issues, set the right tone from the outset?
Chris, you and I make a bit of a joke about governance and that it's ticking the box and all of that sort of thing, and that's fine because we know that part of it is. But in fact, in its truest sense, good governance is about good decision making. It's about respect, an absence of bullying, people being able to do their work without fear or favour. So
Correct.
This is absolutely a cultural question, and you can't address issues around, say, sexual harassment there without looking at some of the top. And when the Local Government Act, for example, talks about leadership, this is about leadership. This is about what is the sort of organisation that is created as a consequence of the conduct at the top of the organisation. I touched before, Chris, on the November 2019 sexual harassment report into the Victorian Public Service. And I think it's a really good read for anyone in the sector, because I would be gobsmacked if the local government review doesn't come up with some similar findings. Yeah. People reported, well, that report found that those most vulnerable tended to be less powerful. It reported that people tended not to make complaints because they were fit for their job, or they thought that behaviour that was clearly inappropriate wasn't serious enough to get someone into trouble or to make waves or to be the person that stood out. So there's a real finding in that particular report that goes to speak up culture, the ability of an organisation to create an environment where people speak up. Now, if you can sort of solve that in relation to sexual harassment, for example, you're probably a long way towards creating a culture that's less apt to be subject to fraud. You're probably creating an environment where organisations will tend to make better decisions because they've got better information.
Well said, Steve. So to finish on that note, if people do want to find out more about participating, and particularly thinking about, as you point out, those people who might have left the sector but would have some relevant input into this, where do they find the information on how to participate?
Pretty easy, Chris. Google the Victorian Auditor General's Office, VAGO. On the homepage, you'll see current reports, reports that have been released and reports in progress. Scroll down the reports in progress and you'll find the detail on the sexual harassment in local government report.
Terrific. Thanks, Steve. We'll have to leave it there. Fascinating as always, the weekly governance update, and I look forward to catching up with you again this time next week.
Good to talk, Chris. Thanks.
Stephen Cooper joining us on the weekly governance update here on VLGA Connect.